what this is, while it is about growing value to our users, what it's really about, right, is about finding sustainable ways to grow value to users, right? And if we're talking about growing value, right, it logically doesn't hold that if you're trying to trick somebody into doing something, right, that they would continue to use you. Right? Tricking somebody is not a sustainable way to get them to continually use your product and to evangelize your product. Right? So those sort of statements are just logically at odds with each other. But again, it's because we've had enough bad actors co-opt what it means. There's a lot of association with spammy and shady tactics that get associated with growth hacking. Right? So I completely understand, if you felt like that is something is really true and associated with growth, but it really isn't. The other thing about it has to come at the cost of customer experience, right, is also at odds, right? Because I think what people tend to focus on, right, I think is more that, oh, it has to be rapid. But rapid doesn't mean crazy fast. Rapid means fast enough, and what fast enough means is a completely separate conversation to have, right? But what it certainly means is fast enough so that we can continually learn about how to sustainably grow value to users. Again, you're going to get sick of me saying this again and again, right? So it cannot come at the cost of customer experience, because if it does, you are not growing value delivered to them, which by definition means what you're doing is not practicing growth or growth hacking the way it was intended to be. The other thing, right, and we sort of touched on this earlier, right, that it's about tactics that generate quick wins. Now there is some truth to this, that yes, it is about tactics, but those tactics have to be informed by a much bigger strategy and a process. So why are we even doing these tactics, right? Like, for example, one of the most famous examples that gets thrown about is Sean's example from his time at Dropbox with the referral mechanism, right? And yeah, that was great. Right, but I think the question that never gets asked, right, is why did they think about doing that? Right, that wasn't just oh, let's do a referral program out of the blue. That was likely because they did hundreds of tests that came before that to try and understand, like, how do we get more people into the product while also giving them value in the product, right? And it was those hundreds of failed tests that ultimately led them to an idea that said, hey, what about a referral program? Right? And that's why that worked. So it wasn't done in isolation, right? And so, yes, we all want a quick win, right? And sometimes these tactics do generate quick wins, right? But it's not something that just comes magically. Those are tactics that are very tightly associated with an understanding of how and what value delivered, actually means. Right? The other myth, and and maybe this myth is because of people like Sean, which is that you'll find this magical growth hacker, right? And he or she will come into your company and they'll wave this magic wand, and somehow growth will get unlocked, right? And I promise you, nothing could be further from the truth, right? Because again, yeah, even if Sean was to go back to Dropbox today, like, I don't think he could realistically promise them that, oh, I'm going to give you the kind of growth you had when you first joined, right? Nobody can. And if you ever meet somebody that can promise you a certain kind of growth, right, in a certain period of time, I promise you they're lying. Right? The only thing they can promise you, and they should be able to promise you, is that they will be able to accelerate your rate of learning about what works and what doesn't work for your users, right? And that is about it, right? And the only way they'll be able to do that is if they follow a systematic process, right? And that process is not just them working in isolation. In fact, you as a growth person, at a bigger company have failed when somebody asks, what is this growth hacking thing? And they say, oh, it's that thing that person does in the corner, right? You failed, right? Growth is a team sport, and everybody has to participate. And in fact, it is everybody's role in the company to participate in growth, which is why, it is also a myth that it's only the growth team that is responsible for growth. They are certainly more in the weeds of growth. They're certainly the tip of the spear for growth, but it is not just their responsibility. Right? There are ideas for growth that can come from anywhere in the company. In one of my earlier days at GrowthHackers, one of the best ideas we had for engagement came from an engineer. right? Not part of the growth team, just something he thought about, right? And in fact, for the companies that do this really, really well, what everybody in the company is asking every day, to themselves, or what their managers are asking during stand-up is, how is what you are doing today going to help either learn more about or move the needle on value delivered to our users, right? And if you don't have a good answer to that question, you need to sort of think about what you're actually doing at this company, right? Because everything you do, right, your entire job, everybody's job is to grow value delivered, right? So I think putting the onus just on the growth team just because they're the tip of the spear is absolutely wrong. And you are actually holding back a company's ability to actually grow to the extent it can if you don't think you are also responsible for growing value to your users. The last couple of things, right? So that you need a background in product or marketing. Like I'm Exhibit A. My degrees are in biochemistry and chemistry. In fact, one of the growth leads we hired, who just, who also was the growth lead at GitLab, Hila Q. Her degree is in biology. I think Sean has a liberal arts degree. Right? You don't need a background in product or marketing. Can it help? Sure. Do you absolutely need it? No. Right? What you absolutely need, right, is some common sense and a sort of logical way of thinking through problems. That's all. Right? Same thing with, like, you need to know how to code. I don't know how to code. Like, I'm not saying I'm the best growth person on the planet, right? But I've had a career that's almost 10 years, doing growth. So I think you can safely say I don't need to know, and I still never learned how to code. I don't think Sean knows how to code, and he's Mr. Growth Hacking, right? And so, does it help? Absolutely. Right? Do you need to know how to code? No, there are tons of tools available, and now there's a whole low code, no code movement that people have leaned in on. You don't need to know how to do this. What you really need to know is how to think through problems sort of systematically and look at everything through the lens of, what is this going to help me learn? Right. And I think the last one is sort of a pet peeve of mine, right? In 9 out of 10 jobs I see posted about growth are really jobs for performance marketers in disguise, right? They're not really for growth people who will think through the entire customer experience, right? And that's part of where the myth comes from. The other reason there's this myth that it's all about acquiring new users is because of VCs, and investors. So if there's any of you on this call, again, no offense, but it's absolutely true, because when you read all of these things in the press about our company is growing, if you dig deep into, hey, what do you really mean? What they're really talking about is, oh, we had 10,000 signups in the last week, and we had 1 million signups in the last month. And signups are great, and I have an open offer to anybody who I ever talk to give me $1 million, and I can promise you I will get 1 million people to show up to your site tomorrow. What I cannot promise you is if even one of those will keep coming back the day after. Right? And that is really where growth comes from, is understanding what will make people come back. Right? So it's truly a myth that it's mainly about acquisition. Growth has if people are going to experience value and continually get value from you, it has a lot to do with using your product, which means it has a lot to do with retention, and it doesn't have to do as much with acquiring new users.